Please find a comfortable place to sit. Place your hands on your legs. Close your eyes or keep a soft focus on the screen. Take a deep breath in and out. A deep breath in and out. Continue to breathe deeply and slowly. Feel relaxation flowing down from your head into your neck, into your shoulders, down your arms, and into your hands and your fingers. Relax down into your chest, into your stomach, and down your legs, into your feet. Continue to breathe deeply and slowly. Okay. Welcome to the 13th lecture of my happiness class. As you probably already know, forgiveness is the topic of today. Forgiveness deals with what may be the biggest obstacle we have to achieving a high level of happiness and keeping it. Because we are constantly sabotaging ourselves from a deep level of the psyche. Many websites are devoted to the subject of forgiveness, and they give a great deal of advice of how to go about it, and give many examples of people learning how to forgive what had been bothering them for much of their lives. Sometimes the forgiveness has to do with parents and their childhood years. That goes rather deep. But of course, everyday grievances are part of the problem when it comes to how we feel. The ability to forgive has many, many deep and important benefits. Not only can alleviate anger, take the edge off of it, especially after an event happened, but the bitterness that some people feel. And it can reduce the victim mentality in which many people live with a constant state of grievance. All these things, forgiveness, if you can actually achieve it, will help alleviate. And people who speak of actually being able to forgive, even to some degree, say that they feel lighter, and less fearful, and more prone to love and accept what is. The psychological benefits of forgiveness are profound. It also does a great deal of good. In fact, it can do wonders for relationships. And by getting rid of grievances, or at least keeping them down somewhat, is that it's a lot easier to appreciate others and not be fearful and judgmental about them, or at least lessen the fear and judgment. Forgiveness is necessary. The ability to forgive. Deep hurts and angers, deep grievances, but also the daily grievances, the small ones. If you're going to achieve the upper levels of happiness, you're going to have to practice forgiveness in some way until you can actually reach a mental state where you no longer see anything to forgive. Forgiveness also, as an added benefit, is associated with better physical health. People losing much of their grievances and the emotions that go with them, and especially the fears and anxiety, which has a major effect on our bodies, that they can learn how to reach a state where the body becomes healthier. Many of the things that harm our physical health can be alleviated through forgiveness. But it ain't easy. The gap between seeing the wisdom of forgiving and actually managing to release rather than merely suppress our grievances is wide. And there is a reason for this. It's not easy to just say, okay, I forgive, and walk away from it. Our mind is attracted, if you will, to anger and seeing the wrong and sins of others, of carrying anger and feeling like a victim. There's a certain investment, if you will, in our subconsciousness. This idea of the subconsciousness is something that Freud brought out, and he also said that there are many things buried there that we often don't think about, but they're going to come out at some point. They're going to take you over, if you will. Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body, full of the negative feelings and emotions and thoughts that can burst through and possess us for a while. So there is this understanding of the deep psyche that we can reach a certain level of what we're aware of now and feel more positive. But what is lying beneath that conscious level is going to come out unless it can be released. And forgiveness is one of the main means of releasing that subterranean negativity. Very important ability. But we have an investment in our grievances, a psychological investment. One of our investments is that we tend to have this idea of justice. And in justice, if someone does harm, they must have harm visited upon them, an eye for an eye. And you might say, well, I don't really believe that, but many people feel that. They want perpetrators to feel the cost of what they did. That's why justice, for many people, when it comes to how they actually feel, is revenge. The high ideals of justice that we hold is quite often revenge. We have an investment, an emotional investment, if you will, in seeing an eye for an eye, a pain for a pain. And that can go rather deep. And forgiveness, for many people, would be going against this feeling of the need for revenge. Also, something that Freud pointed out and has been shown many, many times, that in all kinds of psychological studies, and you can see it on a daily basis actually, is that we tend to project our own feelings of guilt. We have a guilt, sometimes not completely conscious, but we have guilt and we then see it in others. In other words, they call it projecting our sins on others. And you can quite often see the evidence of this. That people complaining about what somebody did and you're thinking, really? I mean, have you taken a look at yourself here? But this is a very common and powerful means of our mind dealing with our feelings of guilt. It's out there. It's not in here. And we have an investment in projecting this guilt. It is a means for us to deal with our own guilt. So, and also, quite often our deep feelings, anger, feeling aggrieved, tends to become part of our self-identity, becomes part of our ego identity of who and what we are. We are the ones who were treated poorly. We are the ones who were victims. And that becomes part of our identity. And the ego really clings to what it sees as our identity. To lose it is to lose a sense of self. So effectively, releasing these grievances, the negativity, what's called the pain body, means that we're going to have to find a way of releasing our subconscious investment in being aggrieved. And we do have a subconscious investment in it. And we're going to have to somehow deal with that investment in grievance before we can truly let it go. What forgiveness is explained on many of the websites and much of the literature that deals with the topic. Most of the explanations will say, of course, that forgiveness is a mental act or process of releasing resentment, anger, and desire for revenge. But most of them also stipulate that it does not require forgetting, condoning, or excusing an alleged wrong. In other words, it's not asking you to forget it, to condone it, not trying to excuse it, but still finding a way to release the emotional reaction to it. So this is what you might call the standard way of understanding forgiveness. Yes, you should forgive, release the emotions, but that doesn't mean you have to give up what you call your sense of justice. There are other views about this that go somewhat deeper, but they're not the common views that you will usually hear, because there are spiritual views. There are spiritual views that see a different reality. And the main aspect here are those who say, look, we don't see reality. In a higher reality, what somebody does to us didn't actually happen. It wasn't really real. It happened not in a true reality. It happened, if you will, for spiritual reasons that are to our own advantage. Therefore, ultimately, there's nothing to forgive. A very different view of forgiveness. It has some advantages, though, and I'll go over this. What most websites and those who are counselors of forgiveness, if you will, what they always do is they recommend a number of steps, a list of steps that one should use to forgive. First, they say you should know what forgiveness is and is not. That's especially for those who are seeing it from the aspect of not condoning what happened. Said that should be kept in mind from that perspective. And second, a very important step is be aware of the costs of not forgiving, what it's actually doing to you, what it's doing to your life, what it's doing to your happiness. And you should also know the really serious benefits, what you gain from forgiveness. You should be aware of that, because being aware of those benefits and understanding just how much not forgiving harms our life and happiness provides the motive. The motive to do what does not come naturally, what is in many ways a very difficult process, because as I said, we have an investment in our grievances. So in order to seriously attempt to forgive, you should understand the many benefits of it. You need a strong motive to forgive, especially if it's going to be effective forgiveness. The third step, which almost everyone says we should do, that they advise that we do, is be aware, full awareness of your feelings about the grievance. feel it. Feel those feelings of grievance. So this is the third step. Now, from this step, there's somewhat of a divergence, if you will. Those who are more into the mindfulness practice, they say, yes, you should be aware of your feelings. You should observe them. But you need to let them flow. Observe them and let them go naturally. So that we're trying to avoid the incessant reliving and relitigating of your grievances, of our grievances. And this is, if you will, the mindfulness that take the power out of those feelings by simply observing them without judging. Many others who are involved in teaching forgiveness and process, and some of them are professional counselors in forgiving, they quite often say, no, you're going to have to do something more. You can't just watch it and observe it's going to go away. I read one of the books, and there are actually many of them, giving advice on forgiveness, and some of them are explaining the technique they use with clients. Barbara Hunt has written a book and explains her methods. She says, first of all, have the person who wants to forgive sit with an empty chair in front of him or her. An empty chair, and then you imagine the offender, the one you want to forgive, sitting across from you. And imagining them, unload on them. Unload all you feel about what he or she did. Just let them have it. The first step. The second step is rather unusual. Here, she says, switch roles, not seats, switch roles. And imagine what the offender may have to say about it. This is an interesting psychological practice, if you will, of, say, I'm going to let them talk. I mean, they're not even there. But actually open yourself up to what they may say is going to open your mind somewhat to a different perspective. You may find in your own imagination that from their viewpoint, they may have seen something different. And it gets you thinking about how much of what you saw and believe may be open to question. The third step, if you will, is, she calls it gaining perspective by going to the balcony. And you're going to observe what you think happened as if you were watching a play. That you're not one of the actors or actresses anymore. You're observing it. Standing back, trying to see the whole thing as if you were a neutral observer. To once again get this perspective and to perhaps see a much larger reality and the circumstances and things that may have fed into this grievance in a broader way. And this can be somewhat effective of kind of reducing what you believe as not actually being what you remember. There's more to it, and what you remembered has been narrowed down. This is important because what keeps you grieving are your memories. Memory is inherently selective. We do not perceive reality, as I said. We perceive our state of mind. We interpret everything that comes in. So we can't say that we experience reality as it is. We have our interpretations of it. And what you remember is going to be mostly the things that had an emotional impact on you, the things that aroused you, made you feel. That becomes large in your memories. So much is kept out of it, of what was happening then. This becomes the major focus now. Your feelings enlarge aspects of your memories. It always distorts them, and it narrows your focus on one aspect, on that aspect of someone doing something that you thought harmed you or insulted you, that caused these emotions. It narrows the focus. The feelings that you felt colors your interpretations of what happened. What actually happened may not go along with what your memories are. And of course, we're always prone to embellish our memories. Our memories change. You think, well, I remember what happened here clearly. Actually, everyone's memories are going to be changed with time, especially the more you keep bringing them up and narrowing them down and focusing on those things that really had an emotional impact on you. Memories are not reliable, and they're never about true reality because you never perceived true reality. The more you gnaw on the bone of a grievance, the more you're going to add aspects to it and focus on certain aspects. So, memory is not necessarily a reliable indicator of reality, and you may have really misinterpreted the larger picture, and therefore give you some reason to question it. Now, even if you can't doubt the facts of a grievance, you can change how you see the offender. And this is called reframing. Your emotions are attached to them and what they did. But now you can take a different look at them and perhaps see them differently. One of the important things to understand is that the ego is heavily involved in any offense and taking offense. The one who purposely tries to hurt someone else, their ego is definitely involved. If you had no ego, the motive would be gone. There are reasons that the ego sees to try to buttress your sense of worth by putting somebody else down or harming them. That is an ego motivation. And the taking of offense is also ego, because you have seen an insult to your self-worth, and that's what hurts. There's where the emotion comes through. So ego is heavily involved, and ego is not your friend. Not your friend in terms of happiness. The ego is invested in constantly looking for self-worth, and it easily takes offense to anything that challenges the sense of self-worth. Reframing is also learning to see the bigger picture and a deeper understanding of anyone you engage with in this life. We should first of all understand just how similar people are inside. As I've traveled around the world, I've always been struck by how similar people are. Their customs are different, their circumstances are different, but we all have the same basic needs and desires. Inside, we are very much the same. The external may be very different, but inside we are the same. We share the feelings and needs around the world. We are all somewhat the same. When you understand that, then it's a lot easier to give people a break. They have the same needs, same emotions. Everyone is looking for love. Everyone. How they react to it, what their experiences were that have somehow taken them down a path of not feeling love, of needing to somehow gain love, or just the whole ego strategies, if you will, of going after love in ways that really are not only effective, that they actually make it more difficult to experience it. So we all have the same basic needs and aspirations. We all face the same emotional challenges. Around the world, human beings face the same emotional challenges. And I have always thought of it like this. In this moment of time in eternity on this planet, this is a special moment of time that has never been. The experiences are somewhat different. Circumstances are somewhat different than anything that has ever been before. And it will never be the same again. This moment, I am going through an experience on planet Earth, and everyone here is my companion on this journey of life. They're all companions going through these moments of time at this particular time. To see them as companions through all the drama, etc., this is our time shared on planet Earth. And when you see them this way, this can change a lot. When I first began my forgiveness practice, I would try to visualize someone who I had a grievance with. I tried to visualize them as a baby, as innocent, as open and needing love. And I saw them in my imagination as still that innocent baby inside. And all the armor we build around our hearts, because this is a cold world, and all the reasons they had to build that armor around their hearts. As I said, that this can be a very challenging experience here. So if you could see that there is a light of innocence shining within everyone that has been completely distorted, and they build defenses that can be rather offensive in order to deal with it. But if everyone still has that loving innocence at the core of their being, then I think we can give them a break. And it changes how we see them. It reframes how we see them. And it can definitely lessen our sense of them being wrong and hurting us on purpose. It's a tough planet. And they're all companions on our journey. When you can actually open up and see that we are all the same in our basic needs, see the fundamental humanity in everyone, see that they're all facing difficult challenges of an emotionally cold planet. What naturally arises in people when you can feel that connection is compassion. You feel compassion for others, and it's natural. Compassion is a very natural feeling to arise. Some would say that it's through our evolution we were prone to do this for the sake of our species. Others would say, no, compassion is the very essence of our being as spiritual beings. But this is something that Emily Hooks said. Only one moment of regarding the person who caused you harm with a compassionate heart can change everything. So if you can actually just achieve that moment, you're well on the way to releasing, to forgiving. Some, as I said, that they kind of take the living in the now, the mindfulness track. This is something that advice from Gina Lake. Gina Lake said to channel Jesus, and many people have seen the messages, believe that, yeah, that's probably true. I mean, these are not your common wisdoms. But this is what Jesus purportedly says in one of her books. Forgiving yourself and others is mostly a matter of letting go. Letting go of the memory of past transgressions and remembering or reconstituting yourself and others anew in each moment. Not living in the past. The key to forgiveness is not bringing the memory of the past into the present moment, but leaving the past where it belongs. This is the living in the now and the present, where all the baggage of the past is left behind. And in this moment, the person who caused you grief isn't causing you grief now. And that's kind of the idea. If you can stay in the present, you leave the baggage of the past behind. And that in itself would be, if you will, forgiving. It's not here. It's not part of this reality. Could be effective. I turn to what most people would not believe, but it may be among the most effective means of true forgiveness. Many people do believe in spirituality, believe that there is a spiritual dimension and that there's a higher purpose to life, and that we don't actually die. That death is not final. But some claim that we are all one in truth, and I probably thousands of different sources where I've read this. What that would mean is that our idea of being separate is an illusion. Is that what does it mean to be one? It means that we actually all share the basic awareness of existence. It isn't an individual awareness. It's one awareness, and we all share it. There is no awareness, there is no consciousness separate from that. That is a fundamental belief in many of the spiritual wisdoms taught. That's central to the perennial philosophy, if you will, that has been around for millennia. As I said, many claim to have experienced this. Colon tipping goes along in this direction. Colon Tipping wrote a book called Radical Forgiveness. And what he says is that our incarnations on earth are pre-planned, with particular learning goals in mind. Purpose, we're here to learn, and to aid our mutual spiritual growth. This idea of pre-planning our lives I've come across in many different sources. There are those who practice regression that takes people into memories of in-between lives. You've probably heard of hypnotizing people and them remembering past lives. Well, there are those who have regularly found that they can have people remember in-between lives. There are the psychics and hundreds of spiritual books that are coming supposedly from a higher source, that this keeps recurring, this idea of pre-planning lifetimes, pre-planning a lifetime on earth. And who is present, usually some spiritual guides with the higher wisdom to understand things, the major participants in one's life. And at that time, that the relationship is pre-planned and decided based upon what your learning goals are on earth. And if you have, for example, a parent, let's say a mother, who has caused you a lot of grief in life, personality, that was agreed to. That was an assigned role. And that however you behave here towards others, you are also behaving in a way that contributes to their learning goals. This is the idea of the pre-planned life. But what this says is that everyone we meet here on earth is a partner in helping each other realize our learning goals. They're all partners, including those who seem to harm us. In fact, those in our lives who we have the most aversion to or anger about, they especially are doing us a favor, because the motive for change and growth is one of those very unpleasant things with strong emotions. They motivate us stronger than anything else, and it's said that they truly contribute to our progress towards our learning goals on earth. So the idea here is that all those who we see as harming us, as causing us grievances, who did not treat us well, they're there and acting according to our plan. They agreed to help us. It's a very different way of looking at it. So in this perspective then, all who seem to hurt us are actually loving partners in a higher reality, aiding our self-chosen learning goals. And it is said, Colon Tipping and others, that if you had this perspective, you would have gratitude for their role rather than condemnation. Now that's a different way of seeing things. The advantage here is that this can go a lot deeper than traditional forgiveness. Tipping, in his book, and this is a quote from his book, With traditional forgiveness, the willingness to forgive is present, but so is the residual need to condemn. Therefore, victim consciousness is maintained and nothing changes. With radical forgiveness, which I just explained, the willingness to forgive is present, but not the need to condemn. Therefore, the victim consciousness is dropped and everything changes. I'm going to bring up an even more radical perspective here. I mentioned before A Course in Miracles, and its explanation of why we're here and what's really going on is probably unique in everything I've ever read. I mean, it goes along with many things. But it says there's a reason that we're going through this dream, if you will, that is different. That most of the sources I read say that it's all about soul evolution and reaching ever higher realization. Some of them say it's because it's God trying to experience and grow in this understanding of love. There are other explanations along with these. But A Course in Miracles gives a unique explanation. As I said, it does say we're dreaming the world, that it isn't real. But he says that we're here going through this because we chose to from some, what we might call ancient event that happened, what we might call heaven, which, oneness with God and oneness with everything, which is total bliss. It says that there was a tiny mad idea that occurred, no malice or anything else, it's just a tiny mad idea. What would it be like to be separate, to not be one? And the explanation is that with the creative powers of the mind at that level of reality, that it had profound consequences. Of Course in Miracles says the situation was immediately taken care of. It was impossible. It completely went against reality. We could not be separate because oneness is the very essence of that reality. But the explanation was the perception, if you will, that there was something wrong. And in that infinitesimal fraction of a moment, there was a feeling of being separate. It says it was an illusion, but there was a feeling. And at that time, a guilt at having betrayed God and a fear of the consequences became very powerful. This then supposedly created the motive for trying to escape. And how do you escape all that is? You have to create a dream, if you will. So the Big Bang happened. We now see physical universe of time. And we can deal now with this terrible guilt, which actually has no basis, by seeing it outside. We now have external beings, an external universe, and we can project our guilt. And so, here in the Course of Miracles, we are talking about Freud at a cosmic level. When we forgive, and the Course of Miracles says we have one function in our lives here, and that is to forgive. When we forgive the offending figures in the dream for what they did not do in reality, we are actually forgiving ourselves. That if you know you're in a dream, you forgive what somebody in that dream is doing, you're actually forgiving that part of your mind that was projecting them in your dream. This then becomes what you might call cosmic psychotherapy. We are releasing our investment in the dream on a cosmic level. So in the Course in Miracles, forgiveness is the way out of hell, which is the dream. It says that God never judges. God only loves us, and nothing actually happened. But we need to deal with this ancient guilt and fear. It seems pretty way out there, but in other words, what it's saying is that no matter how much we can deal with just forgiving things in this way, we have to understand it goes way deeper. And few have gone that deep into their psyche to understand where this guilt and fear that they have actually comes from. So, I'm not saying that what sounds like a kind of a crazy idea to most people should believe in it. But there is something with this advice that I think really does help. It says, we who are invested in the dream are going to find it very difficult to truly forgive because we believe in it, that it actually did happen. It says, though, there is the presence, what he calls the Holy Spirit, that holds the memory of heaven with us and is there. The entire powers of God are there for us. And it says that all you have to do is be willing to forgive, choose to forgive, and the Holy Spirit will do the heavy lifting, the heavy psychological and spiritual lifting, if you will. So this idea that we have someone to turn to help us forgive, I think can be a great comfort. And you might feel as if you can forgive a lot deeper than you otherwise could. So, in the quiet of your mind, choose to forgive. Forgiveness is necessary for true happiness. And learning to forgive and choosing is necessary to the higher levels of happiness, especially if it's going to be a happiness that lasts. The next lecture, I'm going to address the fruits of happiness, what we gain out of being happy. You see, your happiness isn't just about you. Of course, you think, well, happiness that's reward enough. But actually, there are many more rewards to it. There are the rewards of your happiness, but they're also how you affect everyone else. And that is the topic for the next lecture. Namaste.